Welcome to the Authority File, the podcast where you'll hear conversations with academic librarians, technologists, researchers, and authors whose work is laying the foundation for higher education's future. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this series, our guests discuss the intersection of generative AI and critical thinking, posing the crucial question, does Gen AI help critical thinking or erode it? The general takeaway is a positive one, although there are many factors that must be established before we get to that point. And we not only examine AI's potential impact on critical thinking, but our guests apply their own critical thinking on how AI can be effectively frameworked, deployed, and used in higher education and scholarly publishing. And during this 4-part series, which is brought to you with support from SAGE, we'll supplement our theorizing with tactical ideas for ensuring critical thinking is preserved and enhanced during the use of Gen AI. Joining me are the author and tech philosopher Dr. Tom Chatfield, Dr. Leo Lowe, Dean and Professor of the College of University Libraries and Learning Services at the University of New Mexico, and Katie Metzler, Vice President of Books and Social Science Innovation at SAGE. In this first episode, we meet our guests and get right into the crux of the issue, why we should be focused on foregrounding critical thinking in the use of generative AI. All right, welcome to the program. So why don't we start with brief introductions? Can each of you just describe your current roles and or research? And Dr. Lowe, why don't we start with you?
Well, thank you, Bill. I'm Leo Lowe. I'm the Dean and Professor of the College of University Libraries and Learning Sciences at the University of New Mexico in the United States. So I oversee the university libraries, the Learning Sciences academic program, and the university press. And right now at UNM, I'm overseeing, developing, leading the AI empowerment initiative, hoping to kind of get the community together to work on AI. And my research is primarily on AI literacy within education and librarianship. And I think it's crucial to equip educators and students on AI. And a major part of my research within that is prompt engineering on how to use that, the interaction of humans and AI, generative AI, to enhance teaching and learning.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're certainly on the right program, so thank you for being here. And Katie, how about you?
Hi, I'm Katie Metzler. I'm Vice President of Books and Social Science Innovation at SAGE, which is an independent academic publisher. My role at SAGE includes leadership of our books editorial team in the UK, as well as the teams working on our online courses products, Sage Campus and Epigeum. And I also co-lead alongside our CTO a newly formed generative AI steering group at SAGE. So it's great to be here to talk about this with you all.
Excellent. And Tom, over to you.
Hello, I'm Tom Chatfield, and I'm an author and philosopher of technology with a particular interest in critical thinking. I've written a number of critical thinking textbooks for SAGE and designed online courses for them and others. I also chair a number of creators' organisations in the UK, and I'm on the advisory council of the British Library. And what holds all this together is a sort of fascination with what it means to think about and use technology well, and increasingly with the kind of ethics and governance and deployment of AI in education and in society as a whole, and how critical thinking skills can better equip us to do it slightly more wisely.
Right. Excellent. Well, and that's obviously what we're going to be talking about over the course of these episodes. So maybe we can start with the crux of the issue we're discussing here, which is the benefits and pitfalls of critical thinking and generative AI. Why should we be considered with or about using and or losing critical thinking skills with AI? In other words, why is it important to leverage critical thinking when using AI in research, and how can it be dangerous to blindly rely on what it produces for us? And Tom, I'm just going to pitch that over to you to get it going.
So I guess for me, critical thinking is two things above all. It's reality orientated, by which I mean it's about kind of trying to become a little bit less deceived about what's really going on in the world. And it's a team sport. It's a collective, collaborative undertaking because to some degree, you're always trying to pause, scrutinize your own assumptions, and identify blind spots and limitations in your knowledge and cognition. And that inevitably involves leaning on other people, external resources, double checks, and so on. So when it comes to artificial intelligence, and I guess in particular Gen AI and large language models, we have a staggering, kind of semantic, statistical, cognitive augmentation here. It can endlessly produce plausible answers and spot patterns, but it in itself is not necessarily reality oriented. It has hallucinatory tendencies. It produces answers and responses to our prompts, but it's up to us to make sure that the questions we ask of it, the frames of reference we operate within, the priorities we bring are well directed, are well thought through, and it's up to us to check, to triangulate, and to augment. So for me, there's a really profound contrast between magically thinking about AIs as oracles, as just sources of answers that allow us to stop thinking, and really as impetuses to deepen our thinking as sort of cognitive extensions or aids through which we can explore questions from multiple angles, challenge ourselves and others. And this engaged, iterative, collaborative approach seems to me to be a powerful and exciting one. But the countervailing problem that AI is a kind of an end rather than a beginning to thinking strikes me as incredibly dangerous because of the plausibility problem. Endlessly plausible answers, but it's up to us to try to anchor them to reality.
Excellent. Yeah. And Leo, how would you follow on to that?
I think that's a great way to describe it. And also a disclaimer for the entire talk, we are talking about current generative AI technology.
Right.
This thing is changing so fast. Who knows what's going to happen, next week and how it's going to change everything. But I agree with Tom. It is something. It's It's an immensely powerful tool, but it has so many flaws at this point that we need to be realized on how to understanding the technology of it, also understanding how it works so that we can take advantage of it and use it to our advantage. And so there are both pitfalls and benefits of using that, especially in education. When we have to verify a lot of information, that means the librarians or library services come into play on teaching people how to use information literacy skills to verify those. We talk about critical thinking skills, and there's one way to use the tools to teach that in a way that they students and faculty can both apply that in their teaching and learning.
Right.
So that's kind of an overall kind of view of that.
Excellent. And Katie, I'm curious, what your perspective is on this. I mean, as coming from a publisher, you're sort of there to literally support critical thinking in a way, and just kind of pull that out from students and researchers. What's your thought on this?
Yeah, we've produced guidelines for our authors around the use of generative AI in their academic writing. And one of the things we've emphasized in these guidelines is that the tools can generate text that, as Tom says, is linguistically sound, but is factually incorrect. And there's some really powerful examples of the risks of blindly relying on the outputs of generative AI without applying critical thinking and careful fact checking. Just yesterday, there was a story in The Guardian about a group of academics who had to apologize after admitting they'd used Google's Bard in a submission to the Australian parliamentary inquiry, which included case studies alleging serious wrongdoing by the big four consultancy firms, which were in fact fabricated. So you see the emeritus professor there who claimed responsibility for the error is quoted in this article as saying, "I now realize that AI can generate authoritative sounding output that can be incorrect, incomplete, or biased." And that's a very public and embarrassing way to learn that lesson, but it is a deeply important lesson and one that we are absolutely encouraging our authors and academics that we engage with to think carefully about.
Excellent. And Leo, I just wanted to come back to you real quick. You mentioned, some of there are flaws, or I think all of you have now at this point, but can you just sort of articulate a couple of the significant ones?
I think that there are several kind of high-profile lawsuits going on, and that kind of illustrates some of the issues that one with copyright. That's something that librarians care about and
Yes.
publishers care about. And another thing is data privacy and biases and transparencies of the data and its outputs. So those are some of the things that, that's kind of murky at this point. We're not quite sure, because with the technology, it's kind of almost like a black box that we don't know how it comes up with the answers, and we're not quite sure of the training data, where it gets its data from. And so these are some of the things that hopefully with new regulations and policies that can help make it better and improve it for future users.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So I guess, let's just kind of boil this down. And is there a consensus regarding generative AI and its impact on critical thinking? Does it help or does it hinder? Or neither? Or both? Tom, why don't we start?
I'm happy to speak to this one and
Yeah.
say I can't believe for a moment there's a consensus, not least because, as Leo says, what's happening today and what's happening in 2 weeks or in 10 weeks are very different things. What I think there is, and what I think those of us who are very, very aware of some of the kind of structural flaws and problems with systems, what I think there is a tremendous amount of excitement. And I think it's worth sometimes going back to the feeling that people have when they start adopting this and playing with this. And it is one of tremendous empowerment. I am not a kind of starry-eyed utopian, this is all absolutely marvelous and the future's here and humanity's transformed. But the sheer emotional and cognitive excitement a lot of people have from just having a natural language relationship with a kind of endlessly loquacious, patient, seemingly all-knowing, but slightly kind of wild and maybe untruthful companion. It's an astonishing thing. I don't remotely know what it means, but I've been very struck when I talk to people who are reluctant writers, for example, who are not academically trained, who are non-neurotypical, who struggle with social environments, or who are not people who are used to be able to put together coherent pieces of writing, and have got this kind of turbocharged companion, co-pilot, interlocutor. There's an incredible excitement to that, and that focuses me on the opportunities. And I do tend to feel with critical thinking, it's sometimes easy to overlook the emotional aspect. One of the points I constantly find myself making to students and businesses indeed is that about kind of emotional self-regulation and the pausing and the consideration and the sort of preciousness of the habits and routines that underpin critical thinking. But of course, the excitement and sense of possibility generated by a tool, that it can open up new horizons for you to explore, that it can give you permission to question and ask and play and experiment. This is all potentially hugely positive and hugely aligned with the kind of skills we need. And I think, businesses running hackathons and things like that, or obviously translating that to reality is a huge challenge. But the energy of playing with these things and the excitement, we shouldn't just overlook that, even while it's incredibly important for us to talk about some of the structural ways, as Leo ably anatomized, in which there are issues with bias and rights and copyright and truth. Nevertheless, the potential is just enormous and the excitement is very real.
I love that you brought up the emotional side of that, Tom. I think, we tend to just sort of put so much pressure on people to have those critical thinking skills and just think that everybody just naturally has them and just kind of call on them whenever. But yeah, it is. There are some, hurdles there for some folks. Like that, I hadn't thought about using AI in that respect. I think that's a great insight.
So I definitely agree with Tom here on the lack of consensus. I think that it's true to say that there are ways to use these tools which would hinder critical thinking and ways to use these tools which really aid in critical thinking. So if students, for example, use ChatGPT to produce an answer to a homework or essay question without engaging with the input or the output, that's clearly not a use case that educators would support. It's a shortcut. It's offering, limited or no learning value to the student. And if they pass it off as their own work, we would consider that cheating. But if you spend many, many hours, as I have, and I think many of us on this call probably have, crafting prompts and experimenting with how you can use tools like ChatGPT, I think you soon discover that sense of wonder that Tom is talking about. And you discover the potential there to use these tools in ways which actually do help you to think critically about a question or a problem. For example, I was working through a difficult strategic question a few weeks ago, and I prompted ChatGPT to behave as a consultant and to ask me a set of questions to help me find holes in my thinking and to help me sharpen up my arguments. And there's no question that there is the potential for generative AI to actually help us to build and use those muscles. I'm a huge fan of Ethan Mollick's blog, One Useful Thing, which I would recommend anyone listening to this podcast check out. And he writes about AI in education and AI in business. And his blogs are just full of excellent examples of activities and exercises which really demonstrate how to use these tools as tools for thinking and tools for problem solving.
Yes, thank you for that, Katie. And yes, Leo, I was absolutely going to follow up with you on that. I imagine you have something to add too.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. And I absolutely agree with what Tom and Katie have just said. I'm excited by what they've just said as well. And I think that it does both. It can help and hinder depending on how you use it. And I want to add on to what Tom talked about, the emotional aspect of all this actually, is that when we try to implement and we try to educate or actually even just talking about, AI with our faculty, staff, students, there is an emotional aspect of it because in a way, a lot of people are a little bit worried about this taking over what they do. Um, Teaching, learning is a very human interaction. And all of a sudden, this can do a lot of it. Even if at the most optimistic scenario is that, do we still need teachers or instructors anymore if this can become so good that it can become your personalized teacher in a way that it can give you instant feedback, then what does it all mean for education anymore? So that raises a lot of concerns or just anxiety within the teaching profession. So that's something we need to think about as well. Yes, it can do a lot of good, but how can we harness it to assist teachers and not to, replacing jobs and replacing human activities?
Right. Yeah, I suppose we're all kind of coming into this with a preconceived opinion, I suppose, or knowledge based on pop culture and whatever in terms of AI, and we may need to sort of erase some of that or overcome it and reestablish our understanding of what it actually does for us. You just heard from author and tech philosopher Dr. Tom Chatfield, Dr. Leo Lowe, Dean and Professor of the College of University Libraries and Learning Services at the University of New Mexico, and Katie Metzler, Vice President of Books and Social Science Innovation at SAGE. This series is brought to you with support from SAGE. Join us next week when we discuss tactical approaches to effectively understanding and using generative AI in ways that preserve our critical thinking skills. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.